Welcome to the 19th edition of the Times Techies webinar series. My name is Sujit John, and I have with me my colleague Shilpa Fadnis. The two of us will moderate this discussion. Today, we have with us two very accomplished software professionals. Both are experts in DevOps. We have with us Ashwin Murali. Ashwin focuses on DevOps at Verloop. Verloop is a customer support automation platform. Ashwin has previously worked at Zoomcar, Freshdesk, Accenture, and several other companies. I think I looked at your LinkedIn. It's like max 2 years is I think average 2 years at a company for the last almost 20 years, I think. Welcome, Ashwin.
Thank you for having me here.
We have with us Pranesh Vittal. Pranesh is Associate Director of Database and DevOps at online pharmacy MedLife. Pranesh seems to be the opposite of Ashwin. Pranesh has spent 5 years with MedLife, and prior to that, almost 8 years with Yahoo. Welcome, Pranesh.
Thanks for having me.
Those who are viewing this can send in questions through the chat box. Shilpa and I will put them to Ashwin and Pranesh. The subject, like we mentioned earlier, is on DevOps. Frankly, it's a subject that I want to learn something about myself. We keep hearing the term all the time, but frankly, plenty of things that I would like to understand regarding DevOps. And Ashwin and Pranesh, I mean, give us the basics of it. I mean, what is DevOps? It's not just technology. I think in our prior discussions with you, we said it's not just technology, it's much more than that. Can you tell us, well, I'll start with explaining what DevOps is.
Sure. So let me first start with what DevOps is not. Okay. So it is not a software. It is not a tool or a product. It's not a programming language. So DevOps, it came into existence when the two different words, mainly development and operations, were coined together. And so DevOps is more like an approach, so wherein they try to bring in a whole lot of automation in place and some of the best practices in order to see how is it that you can achieve better collaboration and see to it that how is it that you are able to release your software much faster, with of course without compromising on the stability aspects. Okay, so DevOps as a it basically you can count it as like I would there's a whole lot of information that is available in the web. It says something called CALMS. Okay, C stands for culture, and A stands for automation. So L stands for lean, M stands for measurement, S stands for sharing. Okay, so let me walk through each of them. Okay, so when I say culture, it's practically impossible to bring in the best of the tools and expect that, okay, I'm going to get the result. So the most important aspect, we call it 3 P's. Okay, the first P stands for people. Okay, so they are like the most important. So wherein they need to understand how this whole thing works. So as I said, it's not a tool. It's more like practices that you bring onto the table in order to achieve all of this. The second P stands for processes. So it's like, how is it that you achieve each of them, and what exactly that you do as a part of your process in order to get the best of the results. And the third P stands for people. So third stands for product. So this is where your whole plethora of DevOps tools that are available in the market. So that is kind of used in order to achieve this common goal. So by tools, I would mean the Docker, the Kubernetes, the Chef, whatever that you can, the existing tools out there. So they are kind of, they would kind of bring in order to achieve this. So the A, which is the automation part. So given that as a DevOps engineer, so one of the most important prerequisite is to think about use cases where you can automate. So it can be as simple as, like, say, for example, a developer has pushed or rather developed a piece of code and he feels that, okay, this is ready for production. So he would push it into the repository, and automatically a build would get triggered. So which actually compiles the code. It runs through a bunch of tests. It kind of runs through a bunch of integration tests, and a package is kind of built and is uploaded into something called a repository, package repository. And from there, so the next set of systems is going to download those packages, install it on your application servers, and maybe run through your tests. And so basically, it's all about automation at every stage. Okay. And the third, which is lean. So given that there's a very high degree of automation that one can achieve, so the teams of the DevOps teams are like generally very lean in nature. So it's almost like there is a ratio of almost 1:15. So which means that for every 15 developers, there will be one DevOps engineer in order to take care of this entire operation, right? The fourth one is the measurement. So given that you are going through a whole lot of automated tests, so it can be the code coverage, it can be the unit test, it can be the test results, pretty much the response times, basically everything can be measured. So that is where the measurement is coming in. And then comes the last bit, which is like sharing. So given that it's more like a shared responsibility. Gone are the days wherein the developers would just develop or rather build a package out of it and they would throw it off the wall, and the operations guys are going to take care of the rest. So there is a whole lot of collaboration. There's a shared responsibility which everyone has to take care in order to see how is it that they can release the product in a more stable manner. They are able to monitor it. They are able to react in a very proactive manner. So in case of any issues. So net, I would put it as like CALMS, wherein C stands for culture, A stands for automation, C stands for L stands for lean, M is for measurement, and S is for sharing. So yeah, that's a brief about DevOps. In my
objective being to release software much faster than traditionally was being done.
Correct. With of course the reliability.
Yes. Okay. And historically, I mean, what's the kind of difference now? Daily, I mean, it earlier used to be releases in several months, 6 months, 1 year, and all that. Now it's like daily, weekly, and all that.
So it all depends on the organizations, like if and how matured is the test infrastructure that you have built, the confidence level of your systems. So, and also the business requirements. So there are companies who have the capability to do the release the moment the developer checks in the code. Maybe it would at the max, maybe matter of few minutes, it's out there on the production system. And there are a few other companies which take slightly conservative approach, wherein they would be generally doing releases maybe once in every day.
It depends on what, Pranesh? It depends on what?
So it depends mainly on the training, right? On the what do you say? So their business requirements, like if it is a customer facing, so wherein you want to deliver the value immediately to the customer, so then it makes sense to do it immediately.
Okay.
So wherein if a company has to go through a whole lot of training programs for their on-ground folks, for their users. So in such cases, it will not be possible to release it immediately because they might not even know, because they are your internal employees and they are the some of the what do you say, customers of your systems, and they need to understand the new business workflows that you would have introduced. So failing which they will not be able to do their duties.
Okay. Does it also depend on the preparedness of the organization in terms of the whole DevOps setup, how prepared they are?
Absolutely, because you need to have all of that systems in place. So also it is really important to have a rollback in case of any issues. How quickly can you retract? How quickly can you roll back in case of any issue? So that this is also one of the very important prerequisites. If a company takes way too long, then they better take it more conservative approach. But if they can release and roll back in a matter of maybe few minutes, then they can certainly take the aggressive path.
Okay. Ashwin, you want to add to that?
So most of what Pranesh said, in addition to that, I mean, so for who I can sort of say for who DevOps is not the right set of tools and the right set of processes for. It's always important to have a process, but then you need to have a certain volume of scale before you can have those efficiency benefits visible as as part of your product or software process, right? If you are releasing in a very strict cadence, then DevOps can help, but may not be that helpful in the release cycle, but can actually come in at a step before, where you are delivering automated tests. You're looking at systems which can ensure that your tests are always up to date, your code is covered properly, your code coverage reports are healthy, test cases are being written and all tests are being executed. You're looking at capturing edge cases. You can do performance tests on automation. All this can help. DevOps is not just about release, right? DevOps is about repeating any process with measurable results if you are going to do it manually more than a set number of times in a small period, right? So if you are going to run as a high-speed organization, then DevOps is definitely required. Like the organization, and I see this difference, very starkly between me and Pranesh, right? Pranesh works in an organization that works sort of in the healthcare industry. So their releases need to be much more thought out. They need to be much more planned, and they have to cover for a lot more bases because they handle customer confidential data,
Okay.
for example, right? And they handle healthcare data. They handle
Okay.
prescriptions, for example, right? So for Pranesh, releases might not be at a cadence, that I would speak of coming forward. They would probably run a release every few weeks or every few months, and that's good for them. I run DevOps or manage DevOps for a customer support organization. I want a scenario, or I live and breathe a scenario where customers see an issue because their end customers are affected during a support cycle or a support request cycle, right? So if my developer can fix this issue, my developer sees an issue and he or she can say, yes, I know what this is, I can fix it, then I will give them a system which can push that change out to production 5 minutes after QA says it's good, right? And in that light, Verloop, for example, runs a deploy every few minutes to production. We average about 80 to 90 deploys per day.
Okay.
For us, having a system that has our backs is what is really important for us. Every step needs to have a fail safe. Every step needs to have a fallback, and once all these processes are in place, basically all the developer does, or all the customer support or customer facing executive comes back and says we have an issue. The developer picks it up, the developer fixes it, pushes it into the pipeline, and 5 minutes later he messages back to the customer's executive saying, you know what, it's out, can you ask the end user to check again, run the case again.
Okay.
So it's both sides of the puzzle that DevOps solves. Now, the last bit where you say that where is DevOps not required? It's not required if you're really not at scale, right? If you are starting off, it's better to focus on your product or your whatever it is that you're intending to sell than on optimizing it for velocity or optimizing it for whatever other parameters you're looking at. Once your business is established, once you know what your customers want, then you pick up pace. You don't start your car in the fifth gear.
When you do so many releases in a day,
Right.
how many of them fail? I mean, do you have to pull back sometimes?
It is an automatic pullback.
In the sense?
In the sense that it goes through a test cycle. If the test cycle doesn't work, it pulls back. So the release never hits the production systems, or the customer never gets to see it.
Oh, is it? So what the customer sees is a perfectly good release.
But to the best of our extent possible, there are still bugs, right? You will always have edge cases. You will always have scenarios which have not been covered by testing. But more or less, yes, the customer always continues to see an evolutionary picture of what we are as Verloop.
Give an example of the kind of things that you're trying to in this 80 releases in a day. What are those little things? Give an example of 2 or 3 of the things that you're trying to solve each time.
Right. So I'll give you an example with comparison with what a traditional brick and mortar organization does, right? When you take a services company kind of a release or a traditional release cycle that you do. Now, what happens in a traditional cycle is there is a bug tracking system. There are a bunch of bugs. Each of these bugs are fixed. Basically, there's a certain time required by the developer to fix those bugs. The bugs are tested locally by the developer, and then they're pushed to a central system where a QA basically deploys it elsewhere in another system, runs a integration or a system check. Right now, once all this is done, what you also do is now this bug list is massive enough to fill up at least 1 or 2 quarters because your release date is 6 months away. You do bugs, you do features, you do change requests, whatever. You take all of these, you put them together, and then 6 months later, you do one big bang release.
Okay.
Right? So the whole system is delivered as version 1 previously to version 1.1 or version 2.
Okay.
So what we do is we have a stream of bugs coming in. We have a stream of features coming in from the product, right? Product and sales. Now, let's assume one of these bugs, right? In both scenarios, one of these bugs is that the grammar of the text that you see on the chat bot for Verloop, right, is wrong. Let's assume that.
Okay.
Now, if I were a traditional company, we would say, yeah, this is in the bug pipeline. You will get it in release 2.
Okay.
But now, because I am leaner, because my team is automated, because my team now trusts the system to deliver as fast as possible, what the developer does is, okay, this is a minor and this really does not do anything in terms of effort, but I can give a better customer experience. So he picks up that file, the developer makes the text change, the grammatical changes are verified, and then the developer pushes the code. The automation kicks in, it sees that the test cases haven't failed, it promotes the build through different environments, QA signs off, 2 minutes later it's in production. I don't have grammatical errors there. 5 minutes later I've actually fixed it.
Okay. Okay.
Right? And this is just for one small thing. Now, the other side of it is where full features are being developed by teams, right? Not an individual developer. A full team is working on a feature. When the feature is ready, all they need to do is ensure that everyone signs off. They just push their code, mix it together, and then the new feature is out into the market. I don't have to do that 6 months later. For me, everything is now.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And that velocity can make or break a business when you are operating as a startup and you're scaling.
Right. 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 Shilpa?
Yeah. Pranesh, what do you think are the prerequisites to embrace DevOps practices in your organization? Maybe you can take it first and Ashwin can come in.
Sure. So, this is one of the common things that gets asked all over the place. So on majority of the forums actually. So what I believe is like the first thing that one needs to understand is like, why is it that am I doing this? So that should be the first question that a DevOps person or anyone for that matter should be able to answer. Then the next part is like, what is it that I need to do in order to achieve this particular, to get an answer to the why. And then comes the how. So which would mean that, okay, how exactly are you going to use, what tool set are you going to use, which are available in the market in order to achieve all of these. So let's say you want to, I see very common pattern wherein people are like, okay, I want to learn Kubernetes, I want to learn Docker. So first thing, what is really required for any person is to understand, okay, why am I doing this? So that is like the most important prerequisite, and then rest everything can be followed. So the next prerequisite, I believe, is one should have a good understanding of the problems that they are facing. So what is it that you are trying to solve? So is it going to be a build job? Is it going to be a deploy job? So is it something that you want to? So what exactly are you trying to achieve, or rather, what exactly are the problems that you are solving? And the third part, which I believe is or rather, one should have a reasonably good hold on on at least some of the programming languages. The most widely used in the DevOps world is so one Python. So there is a whole lot of user community, and there's a whole lot of tool set so that works on Python. Like say for example, if you are on AWS, so the SDK that supports AWS is something called Boto 3. So that is being written in Python. So and having a good knowledge over Python is going to make your life a lot easier in terms of automation. So then there is this language called Ruby. So if you are more interested in using Chef as your configuration management tool, so Ruby is going to be your choice. And then of course the shell scripting is something which is like really important. So net programming languages, at least one of them, and the person should have reasonably good hold over any of these languages. And so DevOps as a team, so it should not believe in having any boundaries. So at least the way that me and my team has been working, so we don't believe in having any kind of a defined boundaries. We are of the strong opinion that okay, boundaries are meant to be pushed. So net you start with this maybe a something very smaller setup. So it could be as simple as like a build and release pipeline, but down the line you need to get better at all along the tech stack. Okay, so one needs to develop a good knowledge about the operating system concepts, about the networking, so how the systems talk to each other. It can be about the build pipeline. It can be about how is it that you build a release pipeline. It can be about the application servers that are available in the market. So basically, how is it that you deploy your software onto application servers? And then the web servers. So how is it that you can configure them, or rather setting up this whole thing? And so the other prerequisite is having a good troubleshooting. So one of the prerequisites is to learn good troubleshooting. So mind you, so these are all everyone has to learn it the hard way. So there is no some magic pill that you are able to take and then okay, you can, yeah, you're like done. So this is not something that you inherit from your gene. So you have to learn everything the hard way, wherein so you have to slog to try and see where is it that it is going to set up. So this whole cycle, it takes time generally, but yeah, eventually you'll get there. And so the next aspect is about automation. Okay, so given that majority of the use cases is like you're trying to automate, right? So you need to think out of the box about how is it that you can automate most of the use cases. So I've actually had a couple of my team members who just hate manual tasks. So human beings in general, they are not good at doing the same task all over again, but whereas the machines are good at it. So you automate a certain thing and it is going to sort it out. So coming back to my team members, so they have this notion or a habit that, okay, they do a same task maybe twice, 2 times or a third time. So the next time they are going to automate it. So they just don't want to do it manually again.
Very boring.
So
Okay.
that's one of the important aspects. So the next thing which I believe is about the curiosity. So the person should have like a lot of curiosity. So whenever you see a certain system work, so you should be curious enough in terms of digging through in order to understanding at a much deeper level, because that is the way for one to develop that know-how about the technology stack that you are working. And the next thing being strong ownership. Okay, so which I believe is like really, really important, because you as a DevOps engineer, there's a lot riding on your shoulders. Technically, like you are the owner of the production systems. You are responsible for the uptime of your systems, which directly or indirectly, however means. So it translates to the revenue numbers. It can be it translates to your business for that matter. So net, you should have a very strong ownership that, okay, this is my piece and I'm going to make sure that, okay, whenever it has any issues, I will be proactive in terms of fixing it. And or rather, I should be the first person to know about the issues before anybody does. And last but not the least is a mindset to work in a 24/7 schedule, because given that you are owner of the production systems, and technically anything can go wrong anytime, right? So you should be willing to take that as a part of your job. So wherein, okay, it doesn't matter what time of the day. So the first and most important prerequisite is the uptime of the systems, and that's something which I'm like really responsible for. So yeah, net, this is all as per me constitute what are all the prerequisites of a DevOps engineer.
Ashwin, you want to add to that?
So I think Pranesh has covered most of it, right? So there is very little that I can add. Nevertheless, right? So on top of what Pranesh said, I'll reiterate one important point, right? That once you bring in a DevOps team into an organization, it means you're scaling, right? Now, there are two sides to scaling. One is you will scale because the team comes in to help you deliver on those promises. The other side is things will crash and burn as well, right? So I think what needs to change in a lot of organizations, right, is when they come in and say, you know what, I want a DevOps team. Let's do, groundbreaking, earth-shattering stuff. A lot of that does not come with enough forethought. You need to change culturally to be able to accept a DevOps team. A DevOps team is going to come in and say, I'm making changes, I'm causing this, there will be outages. Right? So one of the most important things that you need to bring in when you want to inculcate DevOps practices is to remove the fear of failure. Failure should be welcome. Unless the management, the engineering management at least, comes in and convinces everyone that it's okay that we crashed, but then can we now learn from this crash and build guards to prevent those crashes in future, your DevOps ecosystem, right, is not going to be capable of delivering that rapid growth and that rapid scale that you want. The tools will always help you only if you are culturally prepared to evolve. The tools are basically the tools are basically there to help you grow as the next level of an organization, as a technical organization. But then your culture should say, yes, we will move fast. You can't say that we will have automated testing, but we'll do only one release every 6 months. Can you convince the customer now to say that, you know what, you want this, I can give it to you. Do you want to take it or not? Can you bring that change? The second thing is, okay, there's a bug. It's okay. Now we can go fix it. We can test it again and we can bring a new release back out in the next 2 days. Can you accept that? These are changes that you need to bring in culturally. A lot of DevOps and any new age thought, in terms of technology, the cloud migrations or cloud native activities that we all keep hearing, all of that ride very heavily in an organization that is conducive to these terminologies. You cannot use the terminology without the underlying mental model that supports it.
Do you think all the traditional organizations are also forthcoming these days? Because we see that acceptance in the new age companies, startups, right? But do you see them also changing?
Some of them are. Some of them, unfortunately, aren't. I mean, we're not pulling any names here, regardless. But you do have this scenario where there is resistance to change. It's a mental hindrance to suddenly accept that your test cases can fail. It is a major mental block to assume that production can go down. Everyone tries to have a 99% uptime, right? A very important metric. I mean, anything above 90% uptime is, in my opinion, good enough as long as you're running a decent business, right? 90 to 95% is way good enough. Unless you're doing mission critical, you can't be SpaceX and say we have 90% uptime. But then for a traditional business that you're running, 90% uptime is still acceptable. But what is 90% part of? How many releases have you made for that 90% uptime? If you don't touch a system and you claim 100% uptime, then I think you're not doing it right. The uptime metric doesn't have any meaning. I have a 95% uptime with my organization with 100 releases per day. I mean, it makes sense. 95% of my releases don't, 95 out of 100 releases that we make as engineering do not pull the system down. I have a metric. One release is not what matters, right? So if your organization has not yet thought about this angle, then I think DevOps is just going to remain a set of tools and products that you add as cognitive overload to your engineering. You're not solving the problem. The problem is actually elsewhere.
Okay, a lot of questions coming in from the viewers. Let me start. I had some other questions to ask you, but let me ask this. Salim. Salim, it's a long question. He has been, he's working as an associate developer. He's for 3.5 months, I've been working as an associate DevOps analyst. I feel my current role involves repetitive tasks and feel this won't benefit in the long run to me. So I thought of improving myself first and improve DevOps domain practical knowledge so that I can get a better designation than the current one, either in the same company or in a different company. What do? I found a program called IntelliPad DevOps Masters Arctic. It's of 6 months duration, costing approximately 20, including hands-on real-time projects and multiple placement support after completion of the course. Will this course be helpful to me?
Right. Interesting question, right? Pranesh, I'll start first. I'll give the my side of it. You can take the other side of it. Right. Salim, thanks for the question. So here's how it is, right? This is exactly the problem that I was talking to Shilpa about before Sujit asked the question. You are concentrating on the tools. The tools are always an implementation detail. Are your fundamentals in DevOps strong? Are you absolutely confident of how an operating system works, how networks work, how programming languages used in your organization work? Can you, given an application, can you put that in an automated fashion into, can you script a deployment into a server, right? Unless these questions have a positive answer, none of the other tools matter. What is going to happen with scaling just tooling knowledge is you're going to let go of the fundamentals, one, and second, you're going to be left with a set of tools which will be replaced by another set of tools tomorrow, right? And for me, that I think is a waste of a lot of time that you have in your hands as an engineer, regardless of whether you're a DevOps engineer or not. Over to you, Pranesh.
And I remember, I mean, a few days ago when we were discussing your the session today, I remember you saying many of these courses, he mentioned that course and all that. These courses tend to do these technical tools, but that's not, I mean, DevOps is not just the technical tools.
DevOps is never about the technical tools.
Yeah, okay. Pranesh, also that question on, I mean, will it be useful for him to take this course?
So net, I think every organization for that matter. So some of the tasks are like, okay, repetitive nature. Someone has to do it for sure. But so it's a choice. I don't think not many would have, because somebody has to do it. So it is like running a business. So it's all about how is it that you can make it less painful. Okay, because given that, okay, if you are spending way too much of time in terms of doing that particular task, you need to find a way to automate it. Okay, and say instead of going through a whole run book kind of a setup wherein you are doing everything manually. So if you can automate it, all of that. So, and maybe with just a click of a button or just a script, if you can achieve that, so you're actually taking care of one. So removing the boredom that you are facing right now, and also try to see how is it that you're contributing to the company. Because if you don't do that, so you never know, the business might get choked, or your orders might get blocked, or whatever for that matter. So coming back to the courses, as I said, so there's a whole lot of courses that are right now available in the market, but what is really important is to understand where is it that you apply. So unless and until you get that hands-on experience in terms of how is it that you get to use it in the actual production systems, a course or a tool is not going to help you much.
Okay. You would kind of advise him to stay on there and try and apply some of these things within the same company instead of spending 20,000 rupees?
Certainly, as in it all depends. Yeah. So if you can impress your peers or your boss that, okay, you know what, so this is such a boring thing, I have come up with a very innovative to see how is it that I don't have to do this at all.
Okay. Okay.
You're better off.
Okay. Okay.
You could spend that time maybe in bringing in some of the new tools in place. I'm sure who wouldn't want to bring in innovation at their workplace?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So everyone should utilize their time in a very productive manner. And if you can make those boring, monotonous tasks in an automated manner, then you're better off, or you could even utilize that time for maybe learning something new or bringing in new practices, and then it will overall help you within the same company.
Okay. Okay. Shilpa, questions?
Yeah, we started questions. What are the main differences between application servers and web servers? This is from Samshri. So Ashwin, you want to take it?
Sure. So a web server is something that's interfacing with the internet, right? It is the server that is receiving the traffic. Your application server is basically going to handle the application logic that the web server is asking you to perform for a particular action. So if you're to give you a very simple example, right? So my application server could be something like IBM WebSphere or JBoss or Spring Boot server or some or what do you call this, Unicorn or something like that, WSGI. My web server would be either Nginx or Apache, right? So that's that.
Okay. Pranesh, you want to add to that?
Nothing much. Ashwin has pretty much covered. So yeah, application server, one important one that he missed out in the list of names is Apache Tomcat, which is like a very widely used one. Net. So these are the application is server where you're actually deploying the application. So your whole business logic is going to be deployed as a part of that. And web server is some kind of an interface, so wherein you don't want to directly expose your application to the internet. So you need to have some kind of rate limiting or blacklisting or whitelisting logic, whatever that you want to have. So as a part of web server, so that's where Nginx and Apache are like the most common web servers.
Okay.
I had this question from Ibrahim. Will there be downtime during deployment? Does downtime depend on programming language or server?
Okay. All right.
Okay. So I'll go first.
Okay, carry on.
Yes and no, depending on how you deliver the system, right? If you're experienced enough and you've seen how these things can be done, there are ways to do deployments without downtime. You have techniques like canary deployments. You have something called blue-green deployment. Regardless of the programming language or the server, you can do a zero downtime deployment. That said, yes, there are scenarios where you will need to take a downtime, and I've seen those scenarios come up mostly in terms of maintenance activities or some major changes in, let's say, network infrastructure layouts or data center layouts, things like that. So there is no right answer to this, right? If you want, you can do it without downtime. If you want to take downtime and your customers are okay with it, that is fine as well.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So
You
yeah,
do with programming language and server and all that. Does it
Sorry?
depend any dependence on programming language used or
None. Everything for the server, everything is instructions at the end of the day. So a programming language does not mandate downtime.
Pranesh,
all
you were
right.
saying something?
Yes. So basically, there can be two times of downtimes. Okay. So one is the scheduled downtime, as what Ashwin mentioned. So the other one is like unplanned. We call it an outage, production outage. So the first category is when you are doing some heavy lifting. So it could be as simple as like you are moving from a data center to a cloud. Okay. Or maybe you are moving from one region to the other. So given that at least few years ago, majority of the cloud providers were not present in the country. So Singapore used to be the natural choice, right? So, and given that a lot of these cloud companies have now their infrastructure here in India, so a lot of companies would want to move their workload or the servers in into this country. So that is like a common example for scheduled downtime. So it could be like you're upgrading major systems. You're upgrading some database servers. So you're upgrading a whole lot of big bang movement upgrades. So that's when you kind of take a scheduled downtime, which is generally done during the off business hours. So goes after like 12 a.m. to 2 a.m., something like that. And the second category, which nobody likes, is the unplanned downtime, which is like system outages, is what we call. And the systems can go down for majority of reasons. Okay, so it need not be to the language of that you are using. So it can happen with Java, it can happen with Python. So at the end of the day, it's maybe a bad code or some bad design or some kind of abuse traffic, whatever for that matter, is going to bring down your servers. So the downtime can be caused by any. It can be caused at any layer. It can be caused at the front end. It can be caused at the middle ware layer. It can be at the database layer for variety of reasons. Okay, so as a DevOps engineer or as a site reliability engineer, there's one more wing. So one of the most important aspect is how do you build systems that are like resilient in nature? How do you make sure that okay, your systems heal themselves automatically? So when there's an additional spike in traffic, you need to add more servers. So there is a whole lot of rules that can be brought in order to handle these kind of spikes. And if these are not handled, then the servers would crash. So like typically, so whenever there is something which you're not prepared for, okay, so let's say you as a e-commerce company, so you're expecting a certain volume of users, and all of a sudden you ran some production campaign which became viral, or and you get almost like 20x times the traffic that you would on an average handle comfortably. No system can be designed for a 20x spike unless you are like prepared or you have added more servers in order to absorb that load. So it is practically impossible to handle 20x within a matter of maybe a few minutes to a minute at the max. Right. So in such cases, the system can go down because of the load. And yes, and if your database is kind of not optimized, right? So your users are doing some operations which is going to query all along, and finally it is going to fetch the data from the database. And if for whatever reason, if the database is not optimized, it is not able to handle that load. It is not able to handle those many connections. So right, so network, it's at the end of the day, each of these systems are talking to each other through something called connections. If that gets overloaded, then your systems would crash. So there can be multiple reasons as to why a system would crash. So as a DevOps engineer, so we focus on how is it that we build systems in a resilient manner, and how quickly can we come out of that outage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shilpa?
We have this question from Amit Kumar and Koti Reddy. Amit Kumar is currently working in application support and Koti Reddy is working in IT engineering. How can they transition to DevOps?
Okay.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, there was a similar question that we had on, yeah, exactly. How to transition into a DevOps engineer from any other role?
So
Right.
I'll take this one.
Go ahead,
I'll take this
please.
one. So maybe you can
All
add
yours,
on to
all
it.
yours. No, all yours.
So one of the so DevOps engineer it's at the end of the day, it's all about uh, automation at every stage. So DevOps at heart, it means that, okay, how is it that you want to automate your systems? It could be the build process, release process, test, automated rollback, and pretty much everything that you can do can be done as a part of uh, as a DevOps role. Okay, so one needs to have an understanding about the tools that are existing in this place, and also where is it that you are using those tools, and what is it that it is going to help you in terms of achieving it. Like, say for example, a person who wants to transition into a DevOps role. So apart from what I mentioned earlier, right? So it is required for that person to understand the build tools. So by build tools, I mean tools like Jenkins, tools like Travis, tools like Circle CI. I think there's this tool called Bamboo. So there's a whole lot of tools that are there, which is going to help you in terms of the build and release process. So that is one side of things. And a person would have, if he can spend times in terms of honing his skills on some of the configuration tools like Chef, Puppet, Ansible, there's a whole lot of other tools. So at least having some kind of mastery over this, so that it will kind of help them to transition into a DevOps role. And apart from that, having a good knowledge of middleware, the database, the networking. So as I said earlier, so boundaries are meant to be pushed. So net, if you are able to contribute or learn all of these, so it is certainly going to help you in terms of transitioning into a DevOps engineer. Over to you, Ashwin.
Right. So yeah, mostly covered by Pranesh again. So there are a couple of other things that you need to know, right? You need to start becoming familiar with the foundations of at least one cloud. Uh, for fear of sounding like a favoritist, I'm going to say AWS, right? So start with AWS because it is one of the most uh, comprehensive cloud providers out there. It is also one of the most industry standard providers out there. A lot of what you operate as a data center based organization or a traditional organization today is exactly what translates into the different paradigms on AWS. So get familiar with that. In addition to that, if I have to say where you should focus your or train your guns on, I will, as an infrastructure engineer, always say the same 2 3 things. Understand how an operating system works and understand how networks work. These 2 things can take you very far in the cloud journey as a DevOps engineer, because eventually you will start working on the cloud. 99.9% of organizations that understand the term DevOps already are working on the cloud or are very close to working on the cloud. So understanding these two very core tenets of how the internet works, right, is very, very, very important. It's gonna really give you that boost you require in your cloud journey, in your journey as a DevOps engineer. Even operating systems, networks, that's where you should start.
Okay, I had this question. I didn't even know something like this existed, but there's something called no ops.
Yes, there is something called no ops.
Question from Raghavendra Kanakagiri saying no ops means making a step forward in the technological innovation for software development, but is it really the end of DevOps?
So whatever starts, right. So whatever starts does have to end. I'll start with that statement, right? That's one side. The other side is this. So DevOps has, DevOps traditionally started with, let us go from a traditional data center to so we need to understand where DevOps started to understand why no ops happened, right? And so traditionally every company had a data center. Many companies still do. Now, what that means is to run a software company, you need to have a capex. You need to invest in hardware, right? And then one fine day, Amazon said, you know what, this is getting too much. I'm going to start commoditizing it, right? Amazon Web Services was born out of commoditizing hardware so that anyone inside Amazon could run and scale their internal systems without having to worry about capex investments right before they need it. They always had it as a rubber band solution.
Right.
And that was how Amazon Web Services was born, right? So now Amazon Web Services went and said, you know what, you don't need a data center. What you need is computing, right? It became from a capital expenditure to a simple operational expenditure and commodity. You pay for what you use, you get what you pay for.
Okay.
You get how much ever, capacity you need. And that basically let people go into computing models and engineering models where they came up with an idea and they had compute available to experiment on that idea, right? And that was how startups evolved. Now, as these startups became famous, they also started, you also see the pattern of startups having, solving customer pain points. They were very critically customer obsessed. They were solving pain points. A lot of scaling happened because a lot of customers came on board. Now, once customers came on board, people were needed to manage these commodity compute options. And that was how tools like Ansible was born, tools like Chef, Puppet, a lot of whatever cloud compute DevOps tools that exist today were born out of a need to manage commodity systems.
Okay.
Right? And when both these sides of the coin evolved, we went to the point where, you know what, there are commodity systems. Now, what are commodity systems at the end of the day? They are servers which run your business function. Now, as an organization, is a server important or is your business function important?
Business function is important.
Business function is important. Your business exists because of the business function, not because of the server running the business function.
Absolutely.
And that was how functions as a service or serverless was born.
Okay.
Right? So serverless basically says what do you need? You need to run your business function. I will give you a platform. You give me your business function. Let's both agree on the wrapper. We'll package it and we'll run it. You pay me for how many ever seconds you ran that business function.
Okay.
Right? Now, this basically means there are no more servers.
Right.
That also means that there are servers, but you just don't manage them.
You don't manage it. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Now, what does the DevOps team do?
They manage servers, is it?
Yep. DevOps team has traditionally been managing servers.
Okay.
So now, what no ops or serverless ops means is you now get into a paradigm where you help evolve the business function. You don't now worry about managing servers. DevOps as a role will also evolve there. That is the direction where we'll be going.
Okay. Okay.
Now, you can't cry about the fact that there are no servers.
Okay.
I mean, it's gone. Right? If you're running AWS Lambdas or Azure Functions or Google Cloud Run, all three cloud providers have it, right? You have Fargate, you have EKS, you have ECS, you have a bunch of Azure Container Instances, you have a bunch of serverless offerings already. Now, the point is, yes, we've already evolved. There are scenarios where you can run without having to manage servers. You can run a business without having to manage servers. So now what do you do as a DevOps person? You have to evolve around building the entire setup required to run the business function. You don't work as a DevOps engineer who builds servers. You now help build the business function.
Okay. Okay.
If you want to be a developer, you can do that. If you don't want to be a developer, then you build the networks around it. You build the infrastructure components that are required around it. You build the monitoring, you build the observability. These are aspects that a DevOps person will continue to do.
So how are both of you preparing for that world where
we are? I mean, so we do at least I have done a few serverless deployments in the past or recent past, so it's been fun. it's a very different aspect, because if you don't understand that you don't have a server to manage, how do you handle the business function? How do you know what the business function is doing? So the DevOps engineer actually ends up having much more work, because you now need to understand the business function to understand where it can fail, and you have to help build those alerts, those fail safes around those points of failure.
Okay.
So it is again one more step of evolution, right? And this will happen every stage. This will happen, and tomorrow even this is not going to be there. You're going to go and say, you know what, this is my business idea, and there's going to be some sentient being that's going to give you code and say, here, go run it, or it's going to say, no, I like it, I'm going to run your business for you.
Okay.
Right.
Shilpa, there must be questions.
Yeah, some questions here. This is from Santosh Kumar. How is DevOps useful to a business analyst? I have gone through some job profiles which mention the need for DevOps. Can you please help me on this one?
Pranesh, you want to take that?
DevOps for a business analyst. I don't seem to have an answer for that. Let me think through. Okay, basically these two are two different functions. Ashwin, you want to take it?
No, go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, I don't seem to find the connectivity. Let me think really hard in order to see how is it that I can link a business analyst with a DevOps person. It's hard.
Because he mentioned he's seen some of the profiles maybe on LinkedIn or job openings which have that requirement.
So I think what he means, right, Pranesh, if I may.
Sure.
So when a business analyst comes in, right, one of their main jobs is to work in drawing metrics and using that to project business outcomes or project past business outcomes, right? Now, what that also means is you are going to be working with a few managed infrastructure components. You're going to be working with the databases. You're going to be working with systems that might be mixing data, mashing data for you and delivering it to you, let's say as a format, like for example, JSON or XML. You need to be able to interpret this data into meaningful insights for the rest of your business team. So the job description probably, in my opinion, does not have it worded right, but you need to have the basic technology chops to come and work on a tool which is more than Microsoft Excel and pivot tables. You might have to build your own engineering queries. You might have to know how to talk to a database and so on.
So yeah, good that you are able to give some light bulb moment for me, because the area that I can think of is something called data ops. So typically these are like the data engineering side of things. So wherein like say for example, this whole lot of this ETL pipelines is what we call extract, transform, load. Okay, so that's one aspect. And there's gone are the days actually of ETL. So these days we are more into streaming applications wherein the users would want to see the results at that very moment. As with maybe a 30-second latency, you have your results set. So if for a business analyst who is like working in terms of having good analytics, right? So how is it that my business is doing? So that is where this data ops will come in handy. So wherein that particular person has to wear two hats. One of that of a data engineer who needs to understand, okay, how is the data coming in and what all massaging that I need to do on top of it, and then maybe have it stored in some time series database or some analytics database, and on top of that run reports which are typically required for a business analyst. It could be your Tableau, it can be your there are Microsoft Dynamics. So a lot of tools that come in handy in order for you to perform that business analytics. So net, so this is a connect that I can see wherein a person will work both as a data or a data pipeline operator. So wherein he needs to understand how the data is coming in, do the massaging, and then see how is it he can that person can derive in the form of some meaningful insights. It can be in the form of charts, it can be in the form of outcome, whatever for that matter.
Sujit, you're on mute.
Sorry. No, somebody is asking, one of the people who asked questions, can you share your email IDs? In case you can, do send it to us. We'll, I think there are some follow-up questions that somebody wanted to ask you.
Yeah, that'll not be a problem.
Should not be a
I
problem.
think LinkedIn profiles certainly can
LinkedIn
be
profiles are also good. Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah.
This is a question from Shrey. When servers crash, how long does it take to troubleshoot and get them up and running again? What factors does the troubleshoot time depend on?
Skills and access.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can you
Skills
skills
and
and
access.
Access meaning?
Access meaning how quickly can you get into the server that has crashed? Right.
Okay.
So the reason why I mention access is because I have personally been in scenarios where we know a server is crashed, but no one knows the password to that server.
Oh.
So finding and waking the guy up is also counting as downtime.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Now that apart, yes. Jokes apart, skills are basically where all the time counts for, right? How do you start debugging, and how do you debug a system is in itself a very big school of learning. It's a massive exercise, and it comes over time. It's not something where I give you a 60-second answer and you wake up tomorrow morning and you know what to do. For me, it's basically the $1 for the hammer, $9,000 for the knowing where to hit it. That is the kind of approach here. With that said, if a system is down, you should start. I mean, I always tend to start from the fundamentals, right? What is the last known running state? What changed? Is this change potential to cause a failure? If not, then did my cloud provider fail? Did one of my underlying systems fail? What are all the alerts that I'm seeing? What is there in the logs? There are multiple layers where you look at for debugging, but then the right answer is always, it comes with time. You get used to a certain pattern that works for every person. The way I debug a system would be basis my learning of how systems and networks work. So I approach it in a very different light when compared to Pranesh, who's on the call, right? He comes from a very different school of thought. So his approach would be slightly different. He would first go in and check if all his servers are running. I would first look at alerts. It's different schools of thought, but then it's a skill you glean over time.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so to add on to what Ashwin just mentioned, so probably the first thing that you can look for is like the logs. If your logging is kind of good enough, and if the system's first thing first, are you able to even log into that system? So, or if you are using any of the tools which are like pushing the logs out for any of this, something called logs analytics, right? So you can build infrastructure wherein you push the logs and you can do analytics on top of that. So that will be my first approach in order to see how is it that what exactly has happened, because logs give you that critical information about what has gone wrong, and then you can see the health checks in order to see what exactly has happened. So is there a way that the server is kind of responding? The service is it up? So what is the load on the database? So net, there is no simple answer to say that, okay, how quickly can I restore the services back? So majority of the times, outages are due to a bad release. Okay, so unless you do a release, so there's very less chance for something to fail over, unless there's an infrastructure. It could be as simple as the disk getting full. So disk is like your systems have run out of space and the application server crashed. It could be as simple as like deleting the old files, doing some cleanup, and then restarting the services. So the server will spring into action. So net, there is no definite answer to this. It all depends on what actually happened, how quickly that you can diagnose this particular problem. Again, that comes with experience. So you have certain methods that you follow. Okay, this is going to be my first check, and if it goes through, then the second. So you kind of create something we call run book over a period of time, that okay, these are all the common set of issues that we encounter, and this is how I would proceed. And if there is a way to automate that run book, then that is also sorted out. So the moment the systems would go down, so your run book execution will kick in, and it will kind of run through those checks. And then, okay, if any of it is like matching, then it could be as simple as like clearing the disk space and then restarting the servers. So all of this would have happened without a DevOps engineer being even aware of this.
I see. Okay.
So that's the beauty of building an automated run book, which will spring into action the moment you see that, okay, the service is not responding.
Shilpa?
So this is, yeah.
Sorry, you were saying something, Pranesh.
No, that's it.
Nothing.
I was just concluding the answer.
Okay. So do all kinds of companies require DevOps engineers, or there are specifics there?
Ashwin, I'll go first.
Sure, please.
Okay. So to answer your question.
And what's the kind of demand that you see for DevOps professionals now? Like Shilpa was saying.
So there's actually whichever company that wants to get into that scale mode, so would certainly need DevOps, because at the end of the day, you want your repetitive tasks to be automated. You want to have a faster release cycles wherein the developers are like churning out the code, and you need a faster mechanism to take it to production, because unless and until your features are not live on production, your users will not be able to use those features. You will not be able to make some money out of it. So net, any company which would want to invest in terms of, or rather, if at all they plan to become a unicorn or whatever for that matter, so they certainly needs to invest in DevOps engineer, and those people will be able to bring in automation at every stage possible so that you can move fast. So that's my perspective, because majority of the companies whichever have seen scale, initially they might not have a dedicated DevOps engineer. So it could be a developer who is managing both the deployment as well as writing the application code. So over a period of time, they would realize that, okay, this person is actually not writing the code which is going to bring me business into the company, but is doing the role of a DevOps engineer. Sooner or later, they would realize and then bring in a DevOps engineer. But net, it's more like it's just a matter of time that a company would need a DevOps engineer in order to scale. Ashwin, over to you.
You can start small and then make it. Ashwin, you mentioned you can bring in when you bring in a DevOps team. But eventually, what does the entire technology team in an organization, do they fall into that whole DevOps practice, or how does it work? Or is there always a separate team that?
So DevOps. So the whole premise of a DevOps team is to ensure that your cloud properties are running non-stop, right? The lights are always on in the server room. Okay. Now, when you bring in a DevOps team, it already means that you are intending to scale and you are seeing that initial traction, right? If you do not need to scale, you have a sustained throughput business where you have a set outcome, you have a set goal, you just hit that goal and you're fine. What a DevOps team can help is come in, help automate bits and pieces to make you more efficient, and then walk out, right? Okay. But when you are in a business which is continuously scaling and you're evolving as an organization, you're evolving your product goes from one to a bigger product to multiple products to multiple product chains. And this is traditional evolution of how you grow a business, right? In those scenarios, the DevOps team basically becomes cornerstone. So the engineering is basically, it's now a tug of war that every company starts to play in engineering, right? Engineering wants to push everything out the door. DevOps wants to hold the latest stable version running at all times. Now, and then there is the other aspect where sales on the third side comes in and pulls at the same rope and saying, you know what, I've got a sales, I've got a 50% off or 100% off sale coming, which means we're going to see 200x more traffic. So DevOps then goes and says, okay, fine, now let's prep for this, right? So now what engineering does and what sales does is produce experiences for the customers of the organization. What DevOps does is help sustain that customer engagement.
Okay.
And that comes in via delivering or enabling engineering to deliver. It also comes in via enabling sales to bring in more customers, to help build retention, help build customer experience.
Okay. One last question. I mean, where does Agile fit into this? I mean, Agile also sometimes, some of this language I hear in the whole Agile context as well.
Right. So Agile is basically a means to help your organization move faster. What you're doing with Agile is you are reducing the volume of a release. You're reducing the entire life cycle of a process. You're shrinking it down into a manageable component and you're putting it out there. Right? Instead of saying, I will do one full application in 1 year, you're saying, I will do one screen in 1 week or 2 weeks. I will get it tested. I will show it to the customer. Now, let the customer say that he likes the screen, he doesn't like the screen, or he or she doesn't want a particular button there, something of that sort, right? You look for customer feedback, you bring that back in, and then you iterate, right? Now, what that means is you are prepared to make your organization more nimble. Right? You are reducing the lead time from start to finish for an artifact, for any engineering artifact. That is because you've reduced the size of the artifact. It is now a much more manageable piecemeal entity. What DevOps does is it enables you with checks and balances to push that artifact in front of the customer.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So Agile is how you engineer things. DevOps basically gives you that last mile boost to deliver.
Okay. Shilpa, we are 12 minutes past our deadline. Shall we close it?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much, Ashwin, Pranesh. Wonderful talking to you. I learned a lot. I mean, these are complex subjects sometimes. Yeah, and we got some good questions from the audience. Thanks so much. We'll be in touch with you.
Yeah, thanks
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you,
All right,
Ashwin.
yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Yeah, see you guys. Bye.